Oh, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Efficiency Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Leone. This podcast is dedicated to all the women out there who are aspiring to have a career while raising a family. And bitch? Well, that's more than a name and even an attitude. We use it as an acronym. It's for bank, inbox, time, connection, and harmony. Each episode is labeled according to the correct topic so that you can efficiently find the topic that you're looking for. I'm here to tell you, you can have your cake and eat it too. The trick is finding efficient ways to get through the have-tos so that you can make room for your best life. I can show you how. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to the Efficiency Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Leone. If you've been around a while, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're new, welcome to the Beehive. I think you're really going to enjoy today's episode. So BITCH is my acronym for Bank, Inbox, Time, Connection, and Harmony. And harmony is the bow that wraps it all together. It's the thing that I strive for in my life. It's agreement. It's making all of these things work together. And I have an awesome guest here today who's going to talk to us a little bit about harmony and the ways of having self-compassion. How about we start with an introduction? You can say your name. We can learn a little bit about you, where you grew up, and tell me a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So I am Kamini. I am actually based in North Carolina, but I grew up in Connecticut. Grew up the daughter of two immigrant parents. Both came from India. My mom came to the States when she was 13, dad when he was about 19. So it was my sister and I growing up in this small, predominantly white town in Connecticut. And I share that because it's part of my origin story in that being different than most of the other kids, look different. My name is different. One of the things that I faced as a young child was just the desire to belong and the desire to fit in and to be accepted. And so in my own work, in my own journey, I realized that that's where a lot of my people-pleasing perfectionist tendencies came from. I partially didn't want to be a burden to my parents. And then, of course, the need to belong, the desire to belong. But really, I had lovely childhood growing up in Connecticut and, worked professionally as a project manager, worked in the .com industry, built and ran my husband's law practice for about 15 years. But in that process, I also became a mom, and I became a mom to 5. And they actually, I say that they are my best teachers. They have been my best teachers. Through them, I saw the mirror of some of how I was showing up, right? That perfectionism, that people pleasing, which was actually holding me back. And so, and I saw it because they were starting to emulate it. So that's when I really took hold and ownership of where it was coming from and realized if I could do work on myself, I could help shift that pattern. And through that process, realized that actually that was my true calling, was to take my professional acumen of working with individuals and helping them figure out complicated situations and problems, but then also take this experience of understanding of oneself, that deeper understanding of oneself, what could be holding you back, bring those two things together. And so professionally now what I do is I call myself a human potential coach, but really what I'm doing is working with people one-on-one with cultivating that understanding and realizing where those limiting beliefs are happening, where they're outside of harmony, for instance, right? Where are they outside of that within their lives? Because that actually keeps us from that emotional, mental, and physical well-being that can move us forward. And so that's what I'm doing day in and day out now.
I love that. That's so powerful. There's so much that goes into learning about how you behave and how you interpret the world that we can teach our kids. And if you don't have kids, you can just improve your own mental space, right? This just came up for me yesterday. I was at my 10-year-old's volleyball game, and the kids, one said something bad to the other one, and then the other one said something bad back. And I said to the other mother, this is not a reflection of their character. They're just young and learning emotional intelligence, and how we handle this situation is going to impact how they feel about themselves and how they behave in the next situation, right? It has nothing to do with that's a bad kid or that's too sensitive a kid or what. No, they are learning, and even adults being in the same situation have to learn how to manage those different pieces. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
I love that you're doing that. So locus of control is something that I learned a lot about in my own head, right? How is the world happening to me, or how am I managing the things that happen to me? And locus of control was one of those concepts that showed up early in my evolution, I'd say, of becoming like the efficiency bitch and learning who I am and how I want to show up in the world. Can you talk a little bit about locus of control and the difference between that happened to me and how I'm reacting to that thing?
Yeah, so my perspective on just control, first of all, I think it's human nature to want to be in control and to also believe that we control all the things. And that feeling of uncertainty when we don't have control, that can have us spin out. For me, the way that I look at it is shifting the perspective slightly from this is happening to me as how is it happening for me, and what is within my sphere, right? What is within my sphere of, so the best distinction I can offer up is reaction versus responding. One is very disempowering, where we do feel like we don't have a sense of control over our own being and the way that we want to face a situation, versus responding is more empowering. It's more through that locus of control. This is within my realm. This is within my domain. This is how I choose to respond to a situation. So reacting tends to be very reactive. It's not very generative, versus responding is I'm owning my part. I'm owning the pieces that I do have ownership over, and I then will make a decision and take a committed action that's aligned with me, rather than trying to control all the things that are not within that aren't even mine, right? Like, so for instance, how somebody responds to us in a situation, that's really not ours. We have to release the ownership of how somebody chooses to respond to something we say. Now, do we own how we deliver the message? Absolutely. But we don't own, and we're not responsible for their reaction to it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? If someone says something to you or bites at you, or you play it over in your head over and over and over again about what you should have said, what you could have said, why did they say that to me? How dare they? I mean, all that stuff goes through your mind. We're really, it's over. It happened. Now,
Yes.
what are you going to do with
Now,
it?
what are you
Right?
going to do? Now, how do you choose to respond? Exactly.
Yeah, but our brains like constantly go through. I'm reading Solve for Happy right now, and he talks a lot about that voice in your head and the different, why is it talking to you? That voice is not actually you. It's the devil and the angel on your shoulder, and they're giving you suggestions and commentary, but they're not actually you making those
You,
choices.
right?
It's cool. I mean, I get really into thinking about the way how deep our brains are. And, when you look back at the pandemic and all of the things that people were told to do, stay inside, wear your mask, get your vaccine, and you see the level of anger and frustration that came out for a lot of people. I think it's that control. You can't tell me what to do. But then also at the same time, other people are saying like, well, you can't not, because you're going to hurt me. And when you start to have that conflict between control, it really disrupts that harmonious ability for anybody to just get through it. So they're tough things to conquer.
It really is. And it really, it's all about what lens you look at it with too. Because what you just said, right? There's two ways to look at that. One is you can't tell me what to do. You're trying to control me. And the other side of that coin is, well, if you don't, and if I don't step up and say what I need, then I could potentially get hurt. And so they are they're competing with each other.
Yes.
And that's the key, is finding that harmony, the balance, that how do we work and find that what works for us. I am a firm believer in communicating what we need. And then it's also, we don't have control over how somebody responds to that, though.
It's true. There's nothing you can do about it. If you say, I need you to wear a mask inside the store, and you choose not to, like, I can ask you to leave, or I can just deal with it. I mean, that's a very simple example, but they get very complicated. It goes through with our kids. It happens at our work. It happens with our spouse. There's so many different elements. But for me, the key is recognizing that there's multiple angles to every situation, right? If I go back to the volleyball game last night, like the coach had one perspective, the child had another perspective, the other child had another perspective. And when you put them all together, you can see they're all good humans. They all are doing the thing that is the right thing for them in that moment. And maybe it was a bad choice, but it's
Exactly.
then you
Yeah.
learn through the next piece. So, okay, let's talk about self-compassion, because sometimes we make mistakes, like every day, we all make mistakes or do things that we wish we had done a little bit differently. But how does self-compassion come into this? How do you start to move forward once you recognize that maybe that wasn't, you wish you had done something differently?
Yeah. And, self-compassion can be difficult for people. Like I said that I'm a people pleaser and a perfectionist. It was difficult for me to even understand what this concept was. It felt very foreign, which is an odd thing to say, considering that compassion is a very natural thing when you tend to be a people pleaser, right? You're constantly worried about other people. But self-compassion is really leaning into this idea of kindness over judgment. About it leans, so there's three pillars to it: kindness over judgment. The second pillar is common humanity, the recognition that we are all going through something. Just to what you were talking about with the volleyball tournament, we are all doing the best we can. We are all having human experiences, and that we don't have to go it alone. Somebody has had a similar experience to us. We don't have to be isolated, and also therefore can lean on other people for conversation about things. And then of course being in the present moment, right? Mindfulness. We're right here right now. We can't redo that conversation we had. It's just, what do I do now? So self-compassion, when we're talking about things like harmony and coming into that place from and I'm intentionally not using the word balance, because like you, I don't love the word balance. I love how you use the word harmony, because it really is like an ebb and flow. I envision more of a liquid where we're kind of flowing this way and that way, and it's gonna balance to where it needs to be, right?
Correct.
But with self-compassion, the way that helps us do this is we can recognize that mistakes are going to happen. And instead of judging them and saying, and going into the inner critic dialogue of there's something wrong with me, I've messed that up, this is ending, all of those lovely things that our inner critic says, we shift into, how can I use kindness here? What did I learn? What can I take away from this situation? What might I want to do if I ever encounter something similar again? Or let me lean on other people. Hey, I just had this experience. Have you had something similar? What did you do with something like this? Why does that help? Because that's how we actually have things. We move from that, this is happening to me, into this is happening for me. We're continuing allowing that room to grow and evolve, rather than getting stuck and telling ourselves that we're bad. Because where is that story going to get us? That narrative is not going to allow us to move forward at all, but actually lead into stagnation or just paralysis. That whole, I can't decide what the next step forward is. Well, that's because we're probably beating ourselves up.
Yes, completely. And I find most people get stuck just there. It's like, I can't do anything because I don't trust myself to make the next best decision. And people ask me a lot how I can have a job and a business and a book and the kids and all the things. And it's because I trust myself enough to mess up, and then to be okay with it, and then to move forward into the next thing. I saw, totally random, but I saw a meme the other day that said, I'm humble enough to know that I'm replaceable, but I'm cocky enough to know that it's a downgrade. And that's kind of how I am. It really is true. I will continue to be humble and know that everybody has the choice to listen to my podcast or not. But like, I'm confident enough that I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. And, the downgrade thing is a little tongue in cheek, but it's like, I'm just going to go and see what happens. And that's how I get it all done. I trust myself to make mistakes. I trust myself to correct that the next day. That's how I'm learning. That's how I'm growing. You and I were talking before I hit record about me being late. I was 2 minutes late to open the show, and I hate being late. I have this like freak out moment inside of me when it happens. And my mother was like this. And so I know it comes from that. And when I'm in the car with my kids, I'm like, you guys, mommy's freaking out right now because we're late, but this is not about you. You didn't do anything wrong. So I'm very aware, but I also am like so far from perfect. I'm just going to go with it.
But isn't that the key, right? We recognize that's what self-acceptance is all about. Self-acceptance is accepting all the parts of ourselves and knowing that there are going to be parts that maybe, might not be in the best service, right? However, also that part it's just loving that part equally. You and I, we did talk about it. And I said, I totally get you, because I'm the same way. If I'm like running even a little bit late, like my kids know, and I give you props for owning it out loud. I just quietly go inside and just sit with it. And I'm like, it's going to be fine. We're going to be fine. It's fine that you're a little bit late.
One of my daughters like really picks up my energy. If I'm super anxious and like she gets like tears in her eyes, she's so worried about me. And so I learned that I'm imprinting, my nervous energy on them. So that's my effort in learning to do better. I can't always control it, but I've identified it and I can say it out loud.
Yeah. Naming and noticing, or noticing and naming, right? That's such a huge part of it, because then we're at least acknowledging it's there.
Yeah, it's real. So when I was originally trying to formulate my acronym, BATCH, I was looking for an H word. And originally I had talked about health or happiness because it was that component of mind, body, spirit that I was looking for. And harmony was actually one that my mom suggested to replace it. And it fits so well. But health and happiness, mental and physical well-being are certainly huge parts of the harmony space. Can you share a little bit about how you move through or continue to keep yourself healthy, both mentally and physically in this area?
For me personally, it is about making sure that there's time for myself, right? Just like you, I'm doing a lot of different things, wearing different hats, however we want to describe it, the different roles we play. And so for me, my harmony comes from making sure that I am taking that time where it's just me, myself, and I, having that quiet time. So there is meditation involved. There is just physical activity involved. I do use that time to journal. And that's what keeps me feeling like, both from a physical standpoint as well as from a mental standpoint, I'm doing the work with myself. Because I do believe that when we're on the go all the time, we don't always have time to slow down and check in. I do try to actually implement checking in throughout the day, but there is a time every morning that is just, it's an appointment with myself. And I just make sure that I keep that appointment with myself on a daily basis.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I have that morning. I mean, I preach about this, like an hour in the morning before anybody or anything needs you.
Needs me.
Yeah, just sit together,
including the dogs.
Totally,
including the dogs.
A dog, a meeting, whatever it is, the airplane time you have to leave for the airport, like anything. It's just an hour before, and that morning hour can be anything for anybody. If you have to be at work at noon, that looks like showing up maybe at 10 o'clock so that you have an hour before you have to get dressed. Or maybe it's 5 a.m. I don't know. It's different for everyone. I have a daily action plan that I write quite a bit about in my book on that exact topic. And so there's a free download at efficiencyBitch.com/action plan. And we just started printing planners on it. So we have like a product on Amazon coming out, but it is that time of day where you can just like focus on yourself. The other thing I want to tell you I did recently, just like a week ago, so this is brand new. I have been struggling with social time. I am a very social person, but I've been neglecting my friends, and I'll text message with them or I'll call them once in a while or like their stuff on social media. But the actual face-to-face time has really been dwindling. And I was like, I really want to see my friends, but I don't want to plan it. I don't want to organize it. I don't want to like find the right date for everybody because it's just kind of a mess. So I sent a text message to about 20 people who live near me. We're different for, different ranges of friendship, I'd say. Some are acquaintances, some are work people, some are like really good friends. And I just said, hey, every Monday, I want to have like a standing thing at this local bar, which is owned by one of our local residents. Now, I don't drink alcohol, but it was like an easy place for everybody to come together. I said, every Monday, just put it in your calendar, show up if you can, don't RSVP. I might be there, I might not, I don't know. So we're trying this experiment to see if we can just accidentally on purpose all be together every Monday and just see what happens. So I sent that message. 7 people showed up this week. It's funny. I got about 10 people say, oh, I was going to go. And then I can't. I said, look, you don't have to RSVP. Just put it in your calendar for next week. Show up if you can. Don't if you don't. And we're going to keep this experiment going. So I'll let the audience know how it's going over time. But it's just my like on purpose way without having to plan it. Social hour.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. You created your own harmony within the idea of I need social interaction.
And
That's awesome.
sometimes it just, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I tried it.
But you're going to try it.
Yep.
Exactly.
And it is awkward to put yourself out there and be like, can we try this thing? And then I recognize that people on the other end are thinking, I don't want to show up and no one be there. So everyone's going to feel a little uncomfortable at first, but maybe after a couple of weeks of it, we'll all realize that it worked out, and maybe we'll realize, nah, it didn't work out. I don't know, but you just try the next best thing to move the needle,
Yes.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up with how people can continue the conversation, where they can find you.
I am on the internet at kaminiwood.com, or social media, Facebook, Instagram at It's Authentic Me.
Awesome. We will make sure to put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on today. It was really nice to have you. And I'm so glad you came back to listen. Welcome to the Beehive. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do so that you don't miss next week's episode. Until then, I'm your host, Melissa Leon. See ya. Well, that wraps it up. Thank you so much for listening. If you're new around here, please be sure to leave us a review on any podcast platform you're listening to. And you can always reach out to me to let me know what topics you're interested in hearing about, or maybe telling me someone you think would be great for the show. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at EfficiencyBee. Until next time, see ya.